Alright, welcome to the wonderful world of programming with Visual Basic Console. This is Mr. Devitt, and I'm going to work you through a series of tutorials to teach you some awesome skills which will set you up if you're wanting to look at a career pathway or wanting to learn more about programming, or if you're more interested in achieving to the best of your abilities at level 1 and level 2 in programming. So we're going to use Visual Basic, which is a Microsoft product, to try and teach you these main concepts in VB. And the best way to run this is to have this booklet that I've designed up and running next to these video tutorials, as well as your VB environment, which we're going to go through and set up in a moment. Obviously just jump through to the various tutorials where you're currently at within class, and this is there to support your teaching and learnings using a range of different sources to cater for the different learning styles. Right, so this book has got a nice chapter summary and index to table of contents to show the different areas that we're going to go through and work on, starting with a nice introduction, which is kind of just explaining the software development cycle. The main thing that we're going to go through and do is to try and set up our environment and introduce you to the world of VB. So when you first open up VB from your desktop, you'll be presented with a screen which looks like this. So one of the first things that we'll get you to do is to set up your home environment using these settings, so that way whenever we save a project we know that it's going to go to a particular folder, and we always need to just look in this folder for all of our work. So if we go down to Tools, select Options, and then Options, select the All Settings icon to bring up a few extra bits and pieces that are quite useful. Under Projects and Solutions, you can go through and select where you'd like all of your projects to be saved by default. So I'm going to go through and select my memory stick now, and cause this as my base folder under a new folder I've made called Visual Basic Tutorials. So this is where I'd like all of my projects to be made and saved, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for these other areas as well. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to click on OK, and this is now where all of our projects will be saved from this point on. It's important to note that if you ever move computers around the classroom, you'll need to go through that settings once again, just because you set up that per the machine when you install or run with VB. Now that we've got that, we're going to start a new project, and then we'll be presented with a bunch of different options for making projects. We're going to focus on working with something called the console, which is these little black windows that will appear, and it basically takes away a lot of the elements that don't work towards the achievement standard, either at level 1 or level 2, which is to do with forms, which we'll get into at level 3. Forms are fun, and it's the stuff that we're used to. A form is like this window that we can see here now. This window that you can see has got a bunch of properties where we can resize and change the configuration of windows. We've got buttons which we can interact with, and really useful stuff. But as I've mentioned, we're going to focus on working on the console application. So we can either decide to give it a name here, or we can simply select console application, and now we're ready to get started. Okay, you'll be presented with a window like this, and if we make any changes in here, you'll see it being reflected on the screen. One of the first things it is a good idea to do, which I just skipped before, is to go and save our project. It's one of the most important steps to make sure that all of our work is stored in the appropriate place. So under the File drop-down menu, you've got a few options, and a couple of these look very similar and look like they'll get the right job done, but in my experience the best one to use when you first come in there is to use the Save All option. Once you see this, you'll notice that it's defaulting to my Visual Basic Tutorials folder which I've set up. If you hadn't done that setup from the Tools Options area before, you can actually go through and select it each time. But in my experience, sometimes students forget to do this, and then it's saved to a weird place in their K drive, which is hard to find. So I'm going to start a new application called Hello, Welcome to VB, and it's going to create a folder to save all my work. I'm going to click on Save, and that's pretty much the process that you'll go through anytime you go to save your work for the first time. After you've gone through and completed that, from now on you can simply just click this button here, which is the Save All option that we just found down there, and that will just continually update everything that it needs to create this solution or project. Okay, if I was to close out of this program now and take a look at my particular project and what it looks like. Okay, so inside the Visual Basic Tutorials folder, you'll notice now here's the folder that I've just set up. Okay, I've now got a Welcome to VB folder, and this is the stuff that's needed. Okay, you do need all of this information. You can't just chop this particular file here out and expect it to run on any other machine. You do need to have these folders, because inside these folders there's a bunch of other stuff that creates the linkages between all the different files and settings that are required. So when you go to look at opening up your project from a previous day or a previous period, you would need to open this file here. It's called welcome to vb.sln, which stands for solution. So this is the solution, and it will basically open up all the stuff that it's needed inside of this folder here. So I'll go through and double click on that, open this up, and you'll notice we're back to our normal environment. Sometimes what happens when you come into this for the first time, you might have some toolbars that are missing, which means that it doesn't have the same look and feel as what I've got here at the moment. Across the top of the page here we've got some of our standard toolbars which have got links to open up some of those things that we had on the right hand side. So if I just go and click on some of these things, we've got the Solution Explorer, which will bring up our module and our VB, and if I double click that, it will present me with this code once again. So if I accidentally close my bit where I'm typing my code in, double click on this, and it will bring my code back up. Underneath that we've got properties, which is more important for when we're dealing with forms, which we're not at the moment. We've got a toolbox, which we're not going to be using in terms of console stuff, and some other things that are quite useful in terms of error checking that we'll get into a little bit later on down the track. So in terms of what we need when we go and create these basic programs is pretty much this area here. This is our coding window, and it's pretty simple to start with. All of these things that you can see on the screen are required. If you were to delete one of these things here, the program will break and it won't like it. You'll notice that it's now got a blue underline and a little error message box which is popping up here. Okay, so we need to ensure that we have a beginning submain and an end submain to tell the program where our main part of the code will start and finish. So this is where the good stuff's going to happen. When we go to run the program, we can click on this little play button, just like a play button on your MP3 player. This is how we can start the program, check to see how the program is running. So we're going to take a pause there, and this is the end of the introduction and setting up VB for the first time. And the next tutorial will talk about how to go through and begin our coding.